In a small house just outside of Boston, Carol Baker was getting breakfast ready as the morning sunlight poured through the windows. She was dressed in her hospital scrubs with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Having worked as a nurse at the local hospital for 15 years, her movements were quick and steady, each one done with the confidence that comes from years of experience. "Emma, time to wake up. Breakfast is ready," she called out. Soon, she heard the sound of footsteps rushing down the stairs. Her 10-year-old daughter, Emma, appeared at the bottom, her brown hair matching her mother's and her blue eyes, just like her father Mike's, the man Carol was separated from. "Good morning, Mom," Emma said, sitting down at the table and reaching for the pancakes Carol had made. "Only 2 more days until Thanksgiving break. Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house?" Carol hesitated for a moment before responding. "Yes, Grandma invited us this year. It's actually the first time in 3 years." Carol's relationship with her parents, especially her mother, Eleanor, had always been tricky. Eleanor was a successful Wall Street banker, someone who valued social status above everything else. Carol's father, Walter, was a university professor from a much more modest background, but he rarely spoke up against his wife's demands. Just as Carol set the table, the phone rang. It was the hospital. "Can you come in 2 hours early today? Maria's not feeling well." "Of course, I'll be there," she replied. She looked at Emma. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but I need to leave a little early today. Trisha's mom will pick you up after school. I should be home by 7. Emma nodded. Used to her mom's busy schedule, she understood that Carol worked hard to take care of them both. As Carol drove to work, her thoughts drifted back to the day 5 years ago when her marriage to Mike started to fall apart. He had taken a temporary job in another city, and although they hadn't divorced, they were still unsure about their future. Mike had been coming to see Emma every weekend, and recently their relationship had begun to improve. He had even mentioned he would join them at her parents' house for Thanksgiving. After a long shift at the hospital, Carol collected herself before heading home. She had always put her patients' needs before her own, and her colleagues at the hospital trusted her and valued her work. On the drive home, her sister Donna called. "Carol, you're coming for Thanksgiving, right? Mom's been asking about you." Donna, 42, was a successful lawyer and had always had her parents' approval, especially from their mother. Carol felt like an outsider in the family, especially compared to Donna. "Yes, we're coming. Mike will join us later." "Mike, are you two getting back together?" Donna asked, her voice full of surprise. "I'm not sure yet, but we're talking about it, for Emma's sake." "I see." Donna's voice was distant. "Well, let's meet on Thursday. Jason and Lily are excited." Donna's 12-year-old son and 8-year-old daughter were looking forward to the family gathering, but Carol always felt like she and Emma weren't truly welcomed by Donna. When Carol got home, Emma had already been picked up by Trisha's mom and was busy with her homework. Carol ran her fingers through Emma's hair, and they started talking about Thanksgiving plans. "What should we bring to Grandma's? How about a pumpkin pie and maybe an album with your school photos?" Carol suggested. "Yes, I want to show them my school project pictures too," Emma said eagerly. Carol smiled, but a small knot of worry tightened in her chest. She remembered the Thanksgiving 3 years ago when her mother had treated her coldly, but this year, Carol wanted to make good memories for Emma. As Carol began gathering ingredients for the pie, her phone rang. It was Mike. "Carol, I'll be a little late the day after tomorrow, but I'll definitely be there. Please give Emma my love." "Thanks, Mike." Emma's excited. After hanging up, Carol took a deep breath. Despite the family tensions, Emma was always her rock. She was determined to get through this Thanksgiving with a smile, for Emma's sake. On Thanksgiving morning, Carol stood in front of the mirror, checking her outfit. She had chosen a simple blue dress and a silver necklace. Emma wore her favorite red dress, her hair neatly braided. "You look beautiful, Emma," Carol said, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "The pie's ready too." They packed up the homemade pie and carefully wrapped the presents before driving to her parents' house. The large stone mansion in an upscale Boston suburb was impressive and made it clear that her parents had done well for themselves. "Smile," Carol whispered to Emma as she rang the doorbell. Her mother, Eleanor, opened the door, still elegant at 65, wearing pearls and a high-end tweed jacket. "Oh, you're here early," Eleanor greeted them with a cool smile. "Hello, Mother, thanks for inviting us," Carol replied with a strained smile. "Hello, Grandma," Emma greeted brightly. Eleanor gave Emma a quick, almost dismissive pat on the head before leading them inside. Donna and her family were already there, chatting in the living room. "Hello, Donna, Stanley," Carol greeted her sister and brother-in-law. Donna quickly kissed Carol on the cheek but then returned to her conversation with another relative. Her children noticed Emma but made no effort to speak to her. Only Walter, their father, stood up to hug Carol and Emma. "I'm glad you came," Walter whispered in Carol's ear. "I'm sorry for not being stronger." Carol's heart tightened at her father's words, but she smiled and led Emma toward the table to offer their Thanksgiving gifts. "Here's our gift, Mom. We also brought some photos of Emma's school projects." Eleanor barely looked at the gift before setting it aside. "Have you heard about Donna's kids? Jason placed first in the state at the national mock trial competition." As dinner time approached, Carol and Emma sat quietly in a corner of the room, feeling invisible. Emma tried to talk to her cousins, but they were too busy with the adults to pay attention. Finally, dinner was served. The large oak dining table was beautifully set with candles and flowers, and Walter began carving the turkey. Carol and Emma stood up to find a seat. Before they could sit, Eleanor pointed to a small, folding table by the kitchen. "You two will sit over there," she said, motioning to the cheap, plastic chairs. Carol's face drained of color. Donna's family was seated at the main table, while she and Emma were relegated to the side. "Why can't we sit with everyone else?" Emma asked innocently. Eleanor shrugged with a smug expression. "Be grateful we even have a place for you." The words cut deep, and Carol's heart broke as she saw the hurt in Emma's eyes, but she forced a smile, took her daughter's hand, and walked to the side table. The meal at the side table was far from the festive spread at the main table. The plates they were served contained cold mashed potatoes and a few sad vegetables, while everyone else had warm turkey and gravy. "Mom," Emma whispered, "is this all?" The unfairness of it all made Carol's blood boil, but she held back the tears. Emma, though only 10, could see the cruelty and felt the sting herself. At that moment, something inside Carol shifted. She stood up slowly, took Emma's hand, and said firmly, "Come on, Emma, we're leaving." The room fell silent as Carol walked toward the door, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't forget to give this to Grandma," she said, handing Emma a small note. "Thanks, but we're done here." With the sound of the door closing behind them, Carol and Emma stepped into the cold November air. They didn't need to say anything, they both knew they were free. On the way to the car, Carol sent a quick message to Mike. "We're at the Bluebird. Decided not to go to my parents' house. I'll explain later." At the Bluebird diner, the warmth inside felt like a comforting embrace. Doris, the elderly waitress, greeted them with a smile. "Eating out on Thanksgiving?" she asked. "Just some family stuff," Carol replied, her voice soft. The turkey dinner and pumpkin pie she brought out were delicious, and Emma's face lit up with joy. Carol looked at her daughter, her heart full. Emma suddenly spoke up. "Mom, I wrote that note to Grandma." Carol paused, shocked. "What did you write?" "Grandma, why do you hate Mom? Mom is always crying, but we are strong." Carol's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't realized how much Emma had noticed. She reached across the table, hugged her daughter tightly, and whispered, "You really are a strong girl." As Carol checked her phone, she saw a message from Mike. "Is everything okay? I'm worried," she quickly responded, telling him about their decision to leave. Later, back at her parents' house, things were tense. Eleanor tried to hide the note, but Aunt Marge saw it and read it aloud. Silence filled the room. Walter stood up, finally speaking out, his voice calm but filled with anger. "This has gone too far, Eleanor. Carol is our daughter, and Emma is our granddaughter." The family was forced to confront the truth, and for once, Carol knew she had done the right thing for her daughter. Grace Marge raised her voice, her tone sharp. "Eleanor, you should be ashamed of yourself, making Emma and Jason sit at a side table. As your friend for so many years, I have to tell you, this is cruel." The room split into two groups. Some of the relatives supported Eleanor, while others seemed uncomfortable. 12-year-old Jason and 8-year-old Lily exchanged confused looks, unsure of what was going on. "Mom, why don't we ever play with Emma?" Lily asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. "You always say, another time," Donna mumbled, not sure how to respond. She felt guilty but didn't say anything. Deep down, she realized she had also been cold to her sister, mostly because of their mother's influence. The meal continued in awkward silence. When dessert was served, the doorbell rang, breaking the tension. Walter opened the door to find Mike standing there, looking tired but polite. "Hi, Walter, where are Carol and Emma?" Mike asked, his voice steady. "They've already left," Walter replied, almost stumbling over his words. Mike's face changed. "What happened?" Walter led Mike into the living room, where Eleanor was sitting. She looked at her husband, but instead of confronting him, she stayed quiet. Mike greeted the relatives briefly before noticing the tension in the room. Carol's Aunt Marge stood up and began explaining what had happened: the side table, the cold meal, and Emma's note. Marge handed the note to Mike. After reading it, Mike's usual calm expression turned into one of anger and disappointment. He folded the note gently and put it in his pocket. "Is this how you treat your daughter and granddaughter?" Mike asked Eleanor, his voice quiet but firm. "It's not my fault she's separated from you," Eleanor snapped back. "This isn't about our marriage," Mike said, his voice trembling with controlled anger. "I can't forgive how you treated Carol and Emma. Do you know how much Carol has been hurt? And now Emma is feeling that pain too." Eleanor tried to make excuses, but Mike raised his hand. "Enough," he said, his voice resolute. "If you can't treat Carol and Emma with love and respect, then our family is done." He nodded slightly to the relatives and said, "Excuse me," before leaving the room. Walter, walking past Eleanor, muttered, "I'm going too," before grabbing his coat and following Mike out the door, leaving Eleanor behind. Mike got into his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he closed his eyes for a moment. He called Carol, but there was no answer, so he sent a text instead, heading to the Bluebird. "Please wait for me." As he started the car, he saw Eleanor standing at the door, watching him leave, but he didn't care. His thoughts were focused on his wife and daughter, who must still be hurting. Back at the house, Eleanor tried to act as if nothing had changed, but she couldn't ignore the heavy silence in the room. Meanwhile, at Carol's apartment, the warmth of takeout food from the Bluebird filled the air. Emma sat next to Mike on the sofa, enjoying the cake he had brought. Carol's phone buzzed with missed calls from her mom, Donna, and Walter, but Carol didn't feel the need to answer. "Aren't you going to pick up the phone?" Mike asked, looking at her. Carol shrugged. "Just for today. I want to enjoy our time together." She returned from the kitchen with hot chocolate, each mug topped with marshmallows. Emma looked up at Mike with hope. "Dad, will you be here tomorrow too?" Mike smiled and glanced at Carol. "Yes, of course." Carol nodded and teased, "If Dad doesn't mind." Mike straightened up, looking slightly nervous. "Actually, there's something I want to talk about." He pulled out a small envelope from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table. "This is a reservation confirmation. I've decided to end my lease in San Diego next month. I'm planning to move back here." "Really?" Emma exclaimed, her face lighting up. "Only if you two are okay with it," Mike said carefully. "I want to end the separation and try again." Carol was stunned. After 5 years apart, she never expected Mike to propose a reconciliation like this. She finally managed to joke, "Well, my couch is always available," but her eyes glistened with tears. Emma couldn't contain her excitement, bouncing between her parents and hugging them both. Best Thanksgiving ever. The three of them spent the evening in a cozy, impromptu Thanksgiving celebration, filled with laughter and shared stories. Carol felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Mike shared funny work stories, and Emma recounted school adventures. They ignored the phone calls that kept coming in. The next morning, Carol woke up to the sound of Mike and Emma making pancakes in the kitchen. It was the most restful sleep she had in a long time. Just as she was about to join them, there was a knock on the door. "I'll get it," Carol said, pulling her bathrobe tighter around her as she went to answer the door. To her surprise, it was Walter, looking worn out as if he hadn't slept. "Dad?" Carol asked in shock. "Can we talk?" Walter asked, his voice small and hesitant. Carol stepped aside to let him in, and Mike and Emma came out from the kitchen to greet him. Emma, unsure at first, went up to hug her grandfather. "I'll make some coffee," Carol said, walking toward the kitchen while Walter sat down. He let out a long breath. "First, I want to apologize for everything, especially for yesterday," Walter began, his voice trembling slightly. "For years, I let Eleanor control me. I didn't have the courage to stand up to her, and I failed to protect you." Carol listened quietly, a mix of anger, sadness, and empathy swirling within her. "Emma's note, it hit me hard," Walter continued, tears welling in his eyes. "That child saw how wrong things were, how unfairly Eleanor treated you. and how I did nothing to stop it. I didn't go home last night, Walter admitted, his voice shaking. I stayed at a hotel, thinking everything over. Carol, I should have protected you more. Carol was silent, searching for the right words. Dad, I blamed you for a long time, but I see now that Mom had her own problems. Mike, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Walter, Carol, and Emma deserve to be treated with love and respect. Don't you think they deserve that? Walter nodded, his face softening. Of course, I want to change. I've been thinking about my relationship with Eleanor too. She's been hurt by her own mother, and I can see that now. Carol felt a shift in her heart. She had never fully understood her mother's behavior, but now she saw a glimpse of it. A cycle of pain and misunderstanding seemed to stretch back generations. A week later, Eleanor appeared at Carol's apartment, holding a small paper bag. She looked smaller than usual and was no longer the imposing figure Carol remembered. "May I come in?" Eleanor asked softly, her usual confident tone replaced with something more vulnerable. Carol hesitated but stepped aside to let her mother in. When Emma saw her grandmother, she hid behind Mike, unsure of what to do. "What do you want?" Carol asked, crossing her arms. Eleanor started to blame Carol, but quickly stopped herself. "No, that's not it," she said quietly. I've been wrong." Emma stepped forward, her small voice full of determination. "Don't hurt Mom." Eleanor's face softened as she knelt to meet Emma's gaze. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. "Maybe I have been wrong," she said. Mike, who had been silently watching, added, "Emma sees the truth. She's wiser than us adults." Eleanor handed Carol the paper bag. "This is for Emma, a hand-knitted sweater. I made it myself." Carol was shocked. She had never known her mother to knit. You knit?" she asked, her voice full of surprise. Eleanor nodded. "My own mother was cold to me too. Family was about appearances, and love was something we never expressed." For the first time, Carol saw her mother's pain. Eleanor hadn't changed completely, but she was starting to realize the harm she had caused. "Don't think this fixes everything," Carol said, her voice firm, "but if you want to build a relationship with Emma, you're welcome to try." Eleanor nodded, a small but important step forward. Carol turned to Mike and Emma, who stood beside her, offering silent support. "You are my real family," Carol whispered, tears filling her eyes. A year later, Thanksgiving morning arrived, and Carol's apartment was filled with the smell of turkey. Mike was busy in the kitchen, and Emma was setting the table. Snowflakes gently fell outside the window, marking the first snowfall of the season. "Which tablecloth do you like better, blue or white?" Emma asked, holding up both options. "Blue," Carol answered, smiling. Her phone buzzed as she finished confirming the last guest. Mike and Carol had reconciled 3 months ago. Their relationship was stronger than before, and Emma was thrilled to have both parents together. The doorbell rang, and when Carol opened it, she found Walter standing there, holding a bouquet and wine. "Dad, you're early," Carol said with a warm smile. Walter had changed in the past year. He had learned to follow his own path and had started a new hobby. His relationship with Eleanor had improved. Though they still lived together, it was now more balanced. "Where's Eleanor?" Mike asked from the kitchen. "She'll be here soon," Walter replied. "She's a bit nervous." Eleanor had initially said she wouldn't come this year, but in the end, she decided to attend alone. She hadn't fully changed, but she had begun attending therapy and was learning to confront her behavior. The doorbell rang again, and this time, Donna and her family arrived. Donna had been reflecting on her actions too, and she was working on improving her relationship with Carol. "Been a while," Donna said awkwardly, but at least they were talking again. Later in the afternoon, Eleanor arrived as the final guest, carrying a small gift bag and dressed more casually than usual. "Sorry I'm late," she said softly. When Emma saw her grandmother, she ran to her, throwing her arms around her. "Grandma, I'm so glad you came." A joyful look crossed Eleanor's face. She handed Emma the gift bag, which contained a handmade scarf and a note, "Grandma can change too." Before dinner, everyone gathered at the table, and Emma was asked to say a few words of thanks. She began hesitantly but soon spoke with confidence. "I'm thankful that Grandma is changing, that Grandpa is stronger, that Mom is smiling again, that Dad came back, and that we can all be together." Tears filled Carol's eyes as she hugged Mike. Across the table, Walter held Eleanor's hand, and tears were in her eyes too. Everyone sat down together, enjoying the meal. There's no such thing as a perfect family, but old wounds were healing, and new bonds were forming. That was the true meaning of this Thanksgiving.